Hello everybody, welcome back then to the Red Bull Ring as we get set for the second free practice session of the day, a bit later than originally planned. So thank you for your patience. We've had some changes to the timetable today, and it was because of heavy rain this morning. So we had a delay to the whole start of the day. One session got underway and then was stopped before DTM free practice. DTM free practice then started 40 minutes later than scheduled and had to be stopped just 7 minutes in when the rain worsened and it became too treacherous to race around the circuit. And after that, the timetable got rejigged for the afternoon. So this session was due to start 55 minutes ago. It's going to start at 4:25 p.m. rather than 3:30 p.m. local time. So in 4 minutes' time, we'll get underway. But as you can see from the images there, the weather has taken a big upturn here this afternoon. The forecast was always that the heavy rain would go away at around about lunchtime. That's exactly what has happened. And the sun has even made an appearance now here at the Red Bull Ring. So we've got low clouds still around, but it's fairly warm, a lot warmer than it was earlier on, at about 15 degrees. The track temperature is just a touch above that. And with the sun coming down upon the track now, there is a dry line forming. It's still damp offline, but it's certainly way better than it was earlier on. And the fans have even braved it out onto the grandstands now. Many of them were running for cover in that first free practice session this morning. So we're here at the Red Bull Ring for what is the penultimate weekend of DTM 2024. Just this weekend and the one next month to come at Hockenheim. 4 qualifying sessions, 4 races to go, and just 9 points between the top 2 in the championship, Kelvin van der Linde and Mirko Bortolotti, and only 15 points between the top 3 in the championship, with Maro Engel just behind them in his Mercedes. And of course we come to one of the 2 current Grand Prix circuits on the calendar, having been already to Zandvoort this year. We go to former Grand Prix track Hockenheim in a few weeks' time for 2 weeks' time for the season finale. This venue, like many circuits, had a slightly different beginnings than where you ended up. So that the track itself was actually based about 5 kilometres away initially on an airfield site at Zeltweg. And then in 1964, that actually became a Formula One track, the airfield circuit. In 1964, it ran. Then it became a permanent circuit here at the Oostenrijkring back in 1969 when it was built. It hosted Formula One every year from 1970 all the way through to 1987, this venue. In the mid-1990s, it was shortened, the circuit, and then it was bought by Dietrich Mateschitz and reopened as the Red Bull Ring in 2011, and the rest is history. It's a wonderful venue. The facilities are second to none. The scenery, we're south of Vienna, about 2 hours drive from Vienna. It's a wonderful area. A very warm welcome that we always get here at the Red Bull Ring, and it's a fantastic track because one of those circuits where it's not the longest circuit on the calendar, it's just 4.3 kilometres long, but you can see everything that's going on here because the undulations and the fact that it's all fairly enclosed, 10 corners on the circuit. You've got lots of fast sections as well. You've got the downhill section, almost like a ski slalom down through from turns 4 down to turn 8. The very quick double right-hander at turns 9 and 10 to end the lap. A big uphill climb at the start of the lap coming out of turn 1. As in the dry, the cars will get up to approaching 250 kilometres an hour, even on the uphill climb to the first big braking zone after that first corner, which is at the very top of the hill, almost in the clouds. As you can see, the low clouds here up at turn 3. So we had the first free practice session this morning in very wet conditions, and right at the end of the session, a very rapid Lucas Auer in the Mercedes set the 2 quickest times of the session in his last 3 laps. So he was quickest with a 1:38.051 second lap in his Winward Racing Mercedes. He was just 0.165 seconds clear of Thomas Preining, who was quickest at various points in the session. So the reigning champion in the Manthey EMA Porsche was second quickest. Austrian drivers 1-2 in their home race. And then Kelvin van der Linde, third quickest in the Abt Sportsline Audi, 1:38.323 seconds. But having spoken to him after the session, he said, I was actually a bit disappointed that we were only third. I was hoping for more. We really would like it to rain, but I think it's going to dry up tomorrow. And the Audi's lacking a bit in top speed, lacking in torque, which you need to get up the hills. And he was saying that the elevation here makes it difficult for the naturally aspirated cars to breathe air into the engines. We're about 670 metres above sea level. And he said it's a bigger factor, but when we used to race at Kyalami in South Africa, another former Grand Prix track, that That's something like 1,200 metres above sea level, and the Audi always struggled there. So it's less so than at Kyalami, but it is an issue here. And it does look like, certainly for the second part of today, they're going to be running on a dry or drying circuit here. So Kelvin van der Linde, the championship leader, Mirko Bortolotti in second place, went well as well. He was fourth quickest with his best lap towards the end of the session in the Lamborghini. And then Arjun Maini and Maro Engel, two more Mercedes drivers, finishing in 5th and 6th positions in that first session. 1 minute 38, low 138s with the best times in the wet. The qualifying lap record around here is a 1 minute 27.6. And we should be somewhere in between the two on this damp, drying circuit. So we're here in the commentary box overlooking the start-finish line. Just see Arjun Maini leaving the pit lane at the moment. Rennie Rast still in the pit lane, and one or two others, including Maro Engel, but most of them have ventured out onto the circuit. From the graphic, you'll see that there's a mix of slick and wet tyres out there, with most of them having gone for the wets just to be a bit cautious, but I don't think they'll be on them for long. Here to talk you through free practice 2. My name's Chris Hartley, and as always alongside me is Brian Oliver on almost what feels like a different season, a different day than we had just a few hours ago when we had this torrential rain.
If this morning you said to me we'd be in the sunshine looking at a dry line along the pit straight.
Around after exit. It's a cold, slick tyre, cold brakes.
Cold everything. As we listen to Clement Schmid on the team radio, if you'd have said to me this morning that we were going to be sat in the sunshine looking at a dry line along the pit straight and looking at teams coming out into the pit lane with slicks in their hands, I wouldn't have believed you, because we looked out the window and there was a stream running down the pit straight. But such is the weather here in the Styrian Mountains. It has moved on. We've had the GT Masters out on track immediately before this. We saw one Mr. David Schumacher, whose business in DTM might not yet be done. We saw him finishing over half a second quicker than anybody else in GT Masters free practice. Now DTM out on track. You can see the dry line starting to appear. You've heard from that team radio with Clement Schmid that everything's a bit cold at the moment, but it's going to dry out and warm up very quickly. This is going to be our only potentially dry free practice session this weekend, so an awful lot of work to do in the next 42 minutes as the teams gather the data, scrub in the tyres and learn everything that they need to, because after this, the next session is qualifying tomorrow morning.
The BMWs of Sheldon van der Linde and Marco Wittmann both came into the pit. Sheldon was out pretty quickly. I think he came in on wets and went back out on slicks by the looks of it. And Marco Wittmann is still stationary, but they put more wets on his car. So just scrubbing the wet tyres in, but it didn't be long before they're all running around on slick tyres. Arjun Maini has just come back in as well to have the car checked over, and some fresh tyres await him as well. Slick tyres are going to be going on the car by the looks of it for the Mercedes driver, the Indian driver. Rennie Rast comes back in as well into the pit lane, I can see. And again, fresh tyres await him. The car is jacked up by the Schubert Motorsport team, and they are changing fronts only, and slick tyres going on. So yeah, we weren't getting proper lap times yet, but already Luca Engstler, sort of a recce lap, 1 minute 36.5 quicker than we went in free practice 1.
Copy that, then box this lap, pit stop practice, you go into the slicks.
And that's another one who's going to change from wets to slick tyres, because there is not a lot of surface water at all. In fact, it's a completely bone dry line now on the start-finish line, and with the treaded wet tyres, the idea of the grooves in the tyres is that they have surface water, and that they use the channels in the tyres to eliminate that surface water, to throw it away. But when there's no surface water, those tyres overheat very quickly indeed, and the wet tyres just get destroyed. So good idea to probably bed new tyres in, because there is the chance there's going to be some more rain tomorrow, a bit more patchy tomorrow, but you want some tyres that you can throw on, and you know you've already got that surface of rubber off the top, and they'll be working straight away. But you don't want to do more than 2 or 3 laps on the wets on this track, because they'll start to overheat and will destroy them, and they'll be no good for the rest of the weekend.
Yes, so you can see that it is still slippery in places though, so you can put the slick tyres on, but you do need to stay on that dry stuff. So we'll know who's on the wet tyres. Apart from the graphic, we'll see them searching for the puddles out on the track to try and keep them cool. If you are on the slick tyres and you stray out onto the wet stuff, it's going to be like you're on ice. You can see some big clouds still around, so we're not necessarily out of the woods yet in terms of rain. Certainly looks as though the worst is over, as we see Mauro Engel coming in for that pit stop that we heard about. The tyres are changed and he comes out into the pit lane, back out on the track. But there you can see that dry line along the pit straight in towards turn 1, but then it's not especially dry in the braking point into turn 1, and then out of turn 1 you can see it goes dry a bit there. You can also see at the top of your picture the clouds which are hanging low here in the Styrian Mountains. Then up towards turn 2, Mauro Engel there. That is the fastest part, where the drivers take turn 2 absolutely flat out. Can be very hazardous if the track is slippery. Then up this steep hill in towards turn 3, the track looking not especially dry there, and I think Mauro Engel can confirm that by the fact the car didn't turn in when he turned the steering wheel.
Yeah, exactly right. Up at turn 3, just missing the apex, running very wide onto the curbs and almost coming to a stop. It's a slow corner, that anyway. It's the slowest on the lap. You go from the quickest point of the circuit to the slowest point of the circuit. Heavy on the brakes. You can overtake up the inside, but you can also, if you're cute about it, overtake on the way out of that corner. So you often see drivers out slightly out-braking themselves, going for a move down the inside, running wide on the exit, and then being passed under acceleration.
Fate has the front at the moment.
Engstad did a 36.5. I think he's still on slicks. You did a 36.9. People are starting to go to slicks. Are you happy to change as well?
Thinking about it, is Mirko Bortolatti. That's again.
At the moment, not.
At the moment, staying on the way. So yeah, at the moment, it's a slightly delayed transmission now because he's gone quicker since with the 135.7 now. He's doing the 136s when we hit that team radio. So on the wet tyre, that's still quickest tyre to be on at the moment. Mirko have to stay on it in the Lamborghini for now. Luca Engstler's Lamborghini second quickest with the 136.053 second lap. Ricardo Feller is third with the 136.2. But Lukas Stolz has just done the absolute best first sector. There he is in the number 4 Mercedes. Got Mercedes' first win in the DTM for a year at the Sachsenring last time out, winning on the Sunday. That hadn't won since Sachsenring 2023, where Luca was also a race winner. So he's won both of Mercedes' last 2 DTM races a year apart. He's done a personal best through the second sector. Kelvin van der Linde, meanwhile, goes quickest for now with a 135.1. Lukas Stolz is almost as quick, but not quite. 135.180, 27 thousandths between the South African and the German.
One of the stories that we had after race 2 at the Sachsenring with Lukas Stolz was they found out after qualifying that there was a stone buried in the right front tyre. He'd already used his joker to swap tyres at Oschersleben, so as to not put pressure on that tyre at Sachsenring, they swapped it to the front left, which is allowed, and then pitted as soon as the pit window opened. I remember in the race we were going, why has he pitted so quickly? And it's because they had this stone buried in the tyre, and they were worried that any moment now the tyre was going to go down. Fascinating stuff. Didn't know that at the time. Do know that actually, courtesy of Motorsport Total, who give us lots of the news we have here. Is also the case with GT Place, who do a lot of the investigative stuff. A really fascinating story for the HRT team.
There's nothing more exciting and electrifying than a drying track. The best qualifying sessions are always the ones that start damp and end up dry, and you get quicker and quicker and quicker. And that's what's happening in this session at the moment. Van der Linde, Tim, Stolz, all 3 of them are flying at the moment. Nicky Tim, that middle sector, absolute best. Now, the middle sector is the longest sector on the lap. That is basically double the length in terms of time of sector 1, which only takes in essentially turns 1 and 2, the kink up the hill, and ends before you get to sector up to turn 3. Sector 2 takes in turns 3, 4, 5 and 6. The whole middle of the lap takes around about 42 seconds compared to 23 seconds through the first sector, and sector 3 is fairly rapid as well, about 28 seconds at the moment to take in the final 4 turns at turns 7, 8, 9 and 10. Lukas Stolz with the best time now in a 134.051 in free practice 2. Kelvin van der Linde has just done the absolute best first sector there. You can see from the purple line underneath the first sector. That was an absolute best, but Lukas Stolz is behind him on the road, and he now goes even quicker, 23.088 seconds. So on the slick tyre, they're getting the tyres up to temperature. They're also getting a bit more used to where the grip is and a bit more brave with it. So the driver's pushing harder, the tyres are performing better, and the lap time is coming down all the time. We started in the 136s, we're already down into the low 134s, and I think at the end of this lap we'll be into the 133s.
Maybe one of the places they're not finding so much grip is in turn 1, because the dreaded track limit infringement flashes up on the timing screen. And Luca Engsler has had track limit infringement at turn 1 twice. Also at turn 9, Ayan Chan Nguyen has had a warning flash up on the timing screen as well. And we mentioned it at FP1. Track limits always an issue here at the Red Bull Ring. They will see the bollards that will be on the exit of turn 10. The drivers will need to stay on the inside of the bollards on the exit of turn 10 to not pick up a track limits penalty.
So Max Powell goes to the top of the times for now, 134.018. I say for now because Luca Stoltz, I think, is about to blitz that when he comes through. Past the commentary box window he comes, and indeed he is the first driver to break the 133 mark into the 133.3s as well. So that's a really good lap from Luca Stoltz, who is now 6/10 up. He moved up into up into the top 10 in the championship with his win at the Sachsenring. He's had 2 full seasons in the championship. Both years he's finished in 6th place overall in the drivers' standings. Moved up to 8th place, but he's level on points with René Rast, who is 7th, and he's only 1 point behind Sheldon van der Linde, who is 6th in the championship. Here's Arjun Maini, who on team radio in free practice 1 was being told to ease up a bit by his race engineer. He said, "This isn't qualifying, Arjun. We're trying to develop the car. You can slow down a bit if you like," because he was tearing it around in the wet, and he's just as good in the dry. Look, second quickest, 133.479.
Well, they clearly didn't have a chat with him over lunch then, did they? So he's still putting in hot laps. It'll be good to see if he can do that tomorrow morning as well. So we've got a Mercedes first and second with Max Powell now down to P3. Kelvin van der Linde was near the top this morning, still near the top now in a P4, so he'll be happy with that. Just been bumped to P5 because Arjun Maini up to 2nd place, Lucas Stoltz at the top, Mauro Engel into 3rd place now. So 3 Mercedes in the top 3 at the moment.
Yeah, those that have been on the wets have started to bail for the pits now. So Mirko Bortolotti's just gone back out. He's switched to slick tyres. Anjan Nguyen has come into the pits. He was on the wet, but he'll be switching now because they were lapping in the 135s. And obviously the slick tyre is now the one to be on because we're already into 132s, 132.599. Still 5 seconds away from absolute top pace. We won't get there today anyway because it's free practice, but qualifying, all being well, into the 127s. They were testing here a week and a half ago, Tuesday before last, and the best time set by Sheldon van der Linde of the 12 drivers that took part in the private test was a 127.9, only 0.3 of a second off the pole time set by his teammate last year, René Rast, who, remember, got his first ever victory for BMW here at the Red Bull Ring last year.
I expect that many of the teams are wanting to get out and get round as quickly as possible and get as much data as possible at the moment, because although it has been quite pleasantly warm and sunny for a few moments, it has clouded over again and it could start raining at any time. Oh, look at me being the doom-monger. But they'll want to take advantage of the fact there is a dry line on this track. This might be the only opportunity they get to gather data on slicks. You can see spots of rain on the camera lens. That might just be something that's just in the air. But yeah, lots of work to do in this session. As we mentioned earlier, the first session was good for wet weather data, but not much in the way of dry. So a lot to do for the teams here. We've only got 31 minutes, just over 31 minutes remaining of this session.
Temperature-wise, it's fairly mild, 14, nearly 15 degrees. But when they were testing here a couple of weeks ago, it was down to 7 degrees. The warmest it got at the end of the day was 15 degrees. So it's been unseasonably cold at times during September, just inconsistent weather as Stoltz goes even quicker, 132.186. I was talking to Oliver Renschke, who looks after all the media for the ADAC, who run the DTM Championship and all the championships here this weekend in terms of GT4s and GT Masters. And he's based in Munich. He said at Sachsenring last time out on the Sunday, 30 degrees. Got home the following week in Munich, 5 degrees all week. Best it got was 8 degrees, like December, January type temperatures in September. Then it got nice again. The week after that was back in the mid-20s. So very strange weather, and not so much in this part of Austria, but up a bit further north, up closer to Vienna. They've had an awful lot of flooding and rain over the last couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say our thoughts to the people in Vienna who have had some big floods over the last few weeks, we say, and yeah, we just send them our best wishes.
I'm Absolutely right. Arjun, meanwhile, goes to the top of the times, 1:31.706 seconds as you right on board now, coming out of the final turn with Maro Engel, the driver third in the championship, still looking for his first win in 2024. But if he wins the championship, we won't care how many wins he's got. But he has been knocking on the door. He's had, so far this season, 6 podiums. Mirko Bortolotti yet to get a win either, but they are both chasing down this man, Kelvin van der Linde, 2 times a race winner, and the driver that leads the championship standings. He goes and puts his best lap of the session in as well. Third quickest now, behind the Mercedes of Stoltz and, Meini and Stoltz, just ahead of Max Powell. With Maro Engel on a flyer. Maro's just done the absolute best first sector, as you can see there from the screen. There is Arjun Maini. It'd be a great qualifying session if it was qualifying, wouldn't it? It's not, sadly. It's free practice too. But I think you're absolutely right, Brian. They want to get as many laps in as possible because they didn't really learn anything in free practice 1, unless we get more rain later in the weekend. But the forecast is, certainly for Sunday, it's going to be dry.
Yeah, bring your shorts if you're coming on Sunday. That's what I say. Tomorrow morning, practice quali could potentially be wet. Look how wide Arjun Maini's pushing hard. He goes into turn 10. So who knows? That's always the way, isn't it? We don't know what the weather's going to do. That's what makes it so great, really. Drivers have to adapt. They've got the wet weather data. Now for the dry weather data. Maro Engel with a purple in sector 1, the quickest of anybody. So he's currently in 6th place, looking to improve on his 1:32.742. Personal best in sector 2. In towards a turn at 10, he will come in just a few moments. The back end trying to step out, but he has the adhesion he needs, and out of turn 10 he comes. So Maro Engel will cross the line and will stop the clock in P2, 1:32.104. That's about 8/10 of Arjun Maini's time.
Just before we went on board with Maro, we went on board with Franck Pereira and the gold Lamborghini, standing in once again for Christian Engelhardt. He's studying for him since the Norris ring, with the exception of last time out, where Jordan Pepper stood in for him and had a nice quiet Sunday. Nothing happened on the Sunday with Jordan Pepper. There was no drama whatsoever, honestly. But the car is fixed now after a big hit and that contact that he had with René Rast that sent him flying into the very unfortunate Marco Wittmann, who was reacted very quickly, as you would understand, to seeing this Lamborghini fly into him, take him out of potentially a very good race from the back of the field. Marco was on course for, I reckon, a 6th or 7th place finish at worst, and saw this gold machine flying into his mirrors, taking him out of the race, and got very angry with Jordan Pepper, and then realised when he saw the footage afterwards that actually it was a knock-on effect, and it was contact with René Rast that had sent Jordan Pepper into him. And different opinions. I'm sure René Rast said, well, the door was closed on me, moved under braking. Jordan said something completely contrary to that. But Marco Wittmann, interestingly, looked at the footage and then several times said, I want to apologise to Jordan Pepper because it wasn't his fault. It was my teammate's fault, René Rast.
Yes, teammates, yes. But he was quite surprised there wasn't any further punishment. And as far as Jordan Pepper goes, it was great to see him. He says, I'm not done with DTM. I've got a taste for it now and I want a bit more. So we may well see Jordan Pepper back again sometime in the near future. He absolutely loved it, despite that incident on the Sunday of Sachsenring.
Yeah, it was quick, wasn't he? Quick all weekend long. So, yeah, it was good to have Jordan Pepper. 3 South Africans and 3 friends as well. The 2 brothers, the van der Linde brothers, and Jordan, have known each other and raced each other for many years, all competing on track. But Franck Pereira, of course, is a very rapid driver, and he's just set the fastest first sector so far. Arjun Maini, Lucas Stoltz, Lucas Auer are out. Mercedes locking out the top 3 at the moment. Franck Pereira is the nearest rival to them. If he can hold it together through this middle sector, which ends when they get out of turn 6 down towards turn 7 very shortly, then they'll be on for a really good lap. Lots of drivers get a really good first sector but don't follow it up in the middle, but he has 40.961 personal best. He's lost 3/10 compared to the absolute best middle sector, which at the moment belongs to Arjun Maini, but Arjun has only just done that. Arjun is on course to improve his overall lap time here. He's coming to the pits.
Yes.
But he was on course for a really good lap there. The first sector he lost a couple of tenths, but he was flying in the middle of the lap. But he has bailed for the pits. He's pulled into the scrutineering area for a random check. So Franck Pereira, he's left on his own to come through. Right behind Jack Aitken, over the line he goes, and he moves the Lamborghini up to 2nd the only non-Mercedes in the top 5.
Yeah, look at that. Mercedes stacked up there in the top 5 positions, and suddenly there's Lucas Auer pumping up there into P2, 131.316. So the man who was quickest this morning in the wet wants to prove he can do exactly the same in the dry. So Mercedes first and second, the yellow Mamba out there on track. There's Lucas Stoltz once again. You mentioned Lucas Stoltz, whether he's Mauro Engel, should I say, whether he could win a championship without winning any races. Well, Lucas Stoltz and Mauro Engel used to be teammates in GT Masters, and they came incredibly close a few years ago to winning the championship there without winning any races.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's about your average over the season, isn't it? Because the wins help. There's not that many more points for winning a race than for finishing second. Only 5 more points, 25 versus 20. We talked this morning in free practice 1 about those bonus points you get from qualifying as well. Mirko Bortolotti, best qualifier on average. 8 times out of 12 he's been in the top 3. He scored points for being in the top 3 in qualifying, and he's now amassed 14 points. Well, you only get 13 points for finishing in 4th place in a race. If he gets a couple more points, that'll be equivalent to effectively a free podium finish. Not free because he's had to work for it, but you know what I mean. So we saw some improvements from Thomas Preining on that lap, but he's still in 11th place. Mauro Engel is on a personal best lap currently, about to come through the final sector. This is where all the track limits infringements happen, Brian. You've got a couple of marker bollards to signify where you can get to. The idea is not to have all 4 wheels. Go on the curb with 2 wheels, but not all 4 wheels. But it's difficult when that track is downhill and it's sucking you to the edge of the circuit all the time.
Yeah, the idea is to be inside the bollards, not over them, and it'd be interesting to see how long they last into the weekend. But you can tell that the track is dry because track limit infringements are stacking up on our timing screens. Not quite as many as the 200 or so we had a few years ago during one of the Porsche Carrera Cup events, but still a fair few out on our timing screen at the moment. Turn 1 and turn 10. There's a new one just popped in for Thierry Vermeulen at turn 9, but 9 and 10 and 1, those seem to be the areas where track limits are most of an issue, and it may well be a factor when we get into qualifying or indeed into the race tomorrow and Sunday, because what we don't want to see decisions made in the steward's box that affect the race, but track limits infringements may well have an effect on the outcome of a race.
Clement Schmidt only did 14 laps this morning. Some of the drivers did 30 plus laps. Most of them did 25 laps or more. But he did 14 laps. We saw him. He wasn't the only one having it off in the very wet conditions. And it wasn't a big off. He went off through the gravel track, but I think he came back out after that. He's done a few laps at the start of this session, but Clement Schmidt in the McLaren, number 85, has been in the pits for 8.5 minutes now of this session, the last 8.5 minutes consecutively. So losing time there. His teammate Ben Durr did lots of laps. He was one of the busiest in the first free practice session, and he's out there currently running in 16th place. Lucas Auer coming over the grid hatchings, whizzes past the commentary box, goes over the lights. Another good lap, 1 minute 31.316 seconds. So doing what he did in the wet, consistently quick, and at the moment he is 48 thousandths of a second adrift of the absolute best time, but a 131.316 is his best. He's just on a 131.333. That's mega consistent. René Rast, though, is about to load himself up and get up into the top 4 or 5. He's 8th at the moment. In fact, he's dropped to 9th now, but the BMW is on a charge. As sparks fly from the back of the Lamborghini of Luca Engstler, crosses the line in 10th place. Yeah, that was spectacular with the sparks coming out, didn't it? Luca Engstler, along with Max Powell, who have been racing in Indianapolis last week in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. But the weather was better there than it is here in Austria at the moment. René Rast into P6, that purple sector 1, personal best in sectors 2 and 3 as well. So there may have been a little bit of a discussion between Wittmann and Rast, 2 teammates here, but of course also brand mates in the World Endurance Championship racing in hypercars. But must have all been good, because there was a photo online that they put up all having a meal out together in Japan, and Marco was sat next to René at the table. So they had a discussion, both grown-ups, they're both champions, and they will have both sorted it out. And then just carried on with life as you do, which is a sensible thing to do. They didn't have a punch up in the car park afterwards then. Mirko Bortolotti, you can see his personal best in sector 1 and 2. SSR Performance, who this week
have signalled their interest in getting back involved in GT Masters as well. And you might think, well, what's that got to do with DTM? Well, two things really. One, road to DTM. The person who wins that in GT Masters gets funding for the following year in DTM, which is fantastic news. But also, a lot of data is swapped between the two series. So HRT, who this weekend have 2 cars in the DTM, have another 4 in the GT Masters. And there's a lot of information that can be passed between the two series within the same team, which is very, very useful. And we've seen it with several other teams. Emil Fry's another one that are in GT Masters this weekend, also in DTM, GRT Grasser, several other teams as well. And some would say it's a real advantage to be in the GT Masters on the same weekend, on the same track, because data can be shared and transferred to the other car.
There's Mirko Bortolotti, who just did the absolute best lap of the session so far. Top of the times for the Italian with a 1:31.012, and he started this lap beautifully as well with the absolute best first sector time. You're right on board with him now. Engin Güven, who at the test 10 days ago was busy, did 147 laps around here during the course of the day, did the Turkish driver. He is at the moment being caught by the Lamborghini. René Rast, though, has just done the absolute best first sector. His best lap so far was last time around, which put him from 6th up to 5th position. So on board now with following Mirko Bortolotti as he closes that gap coming through the middle of the lap. René Rast has just come out of turn 4, where he and Maro Engel both had offs in the wet this morning. Out at turn 10 then, wide for the Turkish driver in the Porsche ahead. On board with Mirko Bortolotti. What that lap's and another quick one. It's a 1:31.179, so it's about a 10th also behind what he managed on the previous lap. Still good though. René Rast, absolute best through the first sector, 40.9 through the middle sector, which is 3/10 down on what we have had through that middle sector. René's quickest in sector 1. Lucas Auer's got the best sector 2 time, and Mirko Bortolotti is quickest through the final sector at the moment, which takes in the last 4 corners. That's where we are now, riding on board with the 3-time champion, the 27-time DTM race winner. It's going to be an improvement, but how out the order will he go? Second is the answer, 1:31.264, almost exactly a quarter of a second behind Mirko Bortolotti.
Well, we always knew the BMW was going to be quick here at the Red Bull Ring, didn't we? And certainly René Rast proving that. We've had 19 warnings for track limits in this short session so far. The latest of being Clemens Schmid at turn 1. Prior to that, Sheldon van der Linde at turn 10. So the stewards having their work cut out. René Rast, purple again in sector 1. So continuing to push hard.
Absolutely right, and kicking up the gravel just in front of him, the McLaren there as he weaved his way down through the hill of Clement Schmidt. He's back out there, which is good to see, but he cut the corner a bit and had the front right tyre over, and into the pits comes Mirko Bortolotti. So René Rast out there at the moment is the one to watch next, because he's done the absolute best first sector time. René in the number 33 BMW, just coming to the end of sector 2. He's just turning into turn 7. Here he is. And through the second sector, he's lost a bit of time, 41.021. And the best time is about 3.5 tenths quicker than that through that sector. So again, I don't think he's going to improve overall. Is he cruising a bit? Is he going to bell for the pits? I think he is, yeah. So René Rast comes into the pits. But you can see as they peel off the racing line and come into the pit lane, it's still quite damp, isn't it, at the back of the circuit through turns 9 and 10.
There's a lot of black clouds around as well. We have seen it in the past that there can be a change to the BOP overnight between Friday and Saturday. So there may be an element of drivers not wanting to show their hands, or the teams indeed not wanting to show their hands too early, because a BOP change at this point would probably throw you a bit going into qualifying on Saturday.
Yeah, but don't really have the one set of data to go off on what's still a drying track. There's Engin Güven then, who's started the lap pretty well on a personal best at the moment. He's up to 7th place overall. It's the Lamborghini of Bortolotti quickest, the BMW of Rast 2nd, Mercedes of Miney 3rd, Mercedes of Auer 4th, Lamborghinis of Powell and Pereira next, and the first Porsche is Engin Güven here in 7th place. The best Audi is Kelvin van der Linde in 8th. Maro Engel and Lucas Stoltz rounding out the top 10. So onto the tail of Clement Schmidt comes Engin Güven, and he puts in a 1:31.424, his best lap of the session. And that then will put him up into 5th place. Through turn 1 he goes about 110 kilometres an hour. You can see the steep climb. It doesn't really do it justice from that angle. It's a really steep climb up to the top of the hill at turn 3. There's a lot of elevation change here.
You're going to find that out later, aren't you?
Going to run very slowly up the hill. I'll enjoy the second half of the lap a lot more than I'll enjoy the first half of the lap, I think.
I would say do it backwards, but you've got to get up there somehow. So.
Yeah, doesn't really work, does it?
No, it really doesn't. Having said that, I've run around Spa and I'm convinced it's uphill all the way around. I just don't know how that works, but there we go. There's Max Powell, personal best in Sector 1 and Sector 2. As previously mentioned, something different to the Indianapolis track he was at last weekend. But he seems to like the wet conditions. Well, ever since that win on debut at the Nürburgring, everybody said he's the wet weather expert. It's almost like a bit of a monkey on his back now, isn't it? Whenever it rains, everyone looks at Max Powell. But clearly enjoying these drying conditions. P6 for him. The Powell Motorsport family-run team. Great to see them. One of two family-run... one family-run team in DTM. Of course, Luca Engstler, his team is in GT Masters as well as Max Powell's team in GT Masters. There we go. I got the words out in the end.
Yeah, he was running self-ran really last year, wasn't he, Luca Engstler? Moved across to, in terms of DTM, to Grasser Racing team this weekend. Still the Liqui Moly sponsorship that he's had with him for a while now. The former TCR champion, a multiple TCR champion in front-wheel drive touring cars in Germany and Malaysia, the Asian champion as well. Sneaky Tim improves. Into the pits comes Clement Schmidt, running in 18th place at the moment. In terms of how it went here last year, pole position on the Saturday went to Lauren Heinrich in the Porsche, ahead of Kelvin van der Linde, then winning the race on Saturday on a drying track. Lauren Heinrich couldn't quite get the win, but he had a strong second place finish. And from the back of the field, Ricardo Feller charged through to a brilliant third place. On the attack for 90% of the race, the last 10% of the race, he was having to defend because he had René Rast breathing down his neck. It was a fantastic battle between the Audi and the BMW, but the Audi driver held on to a podium here last year. Dry then on the Sunday, René Rast got pole position and then got his first win as a BMW driver, having switched from many years at Audi, first year with BMW last year. Shelton van der Linde made it a BMW 1-2, and Thomas Preining was on the podium here last year as well. In 2022, there were wins for Nick Cassidy in the Ferrari, Formula E star these days, of course, and then Thomas Preining in the wet one on the Sunday in his Porsche. And in 2021, there was a double victory for Liam Lawson in the Ferrari. And Liam, of course, huge congratulations to former championship runner-up in 2021, because he is now finally a full-time Formula One driver, having taken over the seat at RB Racing of Daniel Ricciardo. He's had a couple of stand-in drives already and has done very well on those occasions, but the New Zealander, great to see a former DTM racer. It's certainly not the first one that's progressed from DTM and moved into full-time Formula One seat, so he'll do very well, I'm sure. He's got to start, unfortunately, with a I think it's a 10-place grid penalty, not for anything he's done, but because of an engine change for that car. But he'll shine, I'm sure, even though it's not the most competitive car out there. I think he'll do a good job, and hopefully people will take notice and he'll get a more full-time go at it in 2025 and 2026. So, well, it's, of course, sad to see personalities like Daniel Ricciardo leaving Formula One. It is great to see young Liam Lawson finally get his chance, so good luck to him for the rest of the season.
And as we were discussing in the car yesterday, maybe someone should offer Daniel Ricciardo a seat in DTM. That would really wake us all up, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
On the subject of Formula One and DTM, Thierry Vermeulen has confirmed several times, and he did this week, that he's in regular contact with Max Verstappen, often between sessions at DTM. He's often sharing data and onboard shots. Max is watching him racing, looking at the data, giving him advice. What a driver coach to have, and the reigning Formula One world champion. They're very good friends. Of course, Thierry's father is Max Verstappen's manager. But yeah, in between sessions, during a race weekend, even when it's a Formula One weekend, they're swapping information, and Max is giving advice to Thierry, and it's really good. And get the feeling that we might see the name Verstappen heading up a team in GT3 one day.
And he drove brilliantly, didn't he, Thierry Vermeulen? Really unlucky not to get the win last time out. Only that pit stop infringement, which cost him his maiden race victory. Still, you know, deserves plaudits for getting his first podium in DTM last time out at the Sachsenring. But the win he felt, and a lot of us felt, would have been his, really. He didn't do anything wrong. He drove a perfect race, drove a perfect day to get pole. But it wasn't to be, but it will happen, and when it does happen, it'll feel even better to get that first win. But Thierry, a very talented driver, and seems to have a good working relationship with the Emile Frey Racing team, with Jack Aitken as well. And they are improving all the time as a team. It was almost a terrific, it was almost a double victory for the team, wasn't it, with Jack's win on the Saturday and Thierry almost getting that race victory on the Sunday. It's quite a nice piece with him that he put online, talking about his 10 quick-fire questions, and asked him actually what's your favourite period? What would you sort of time would you have liked to have lived in the most? He said the 1960s, I think. The music was great, the clothes were great, and there was no social media. He said,
yes.
these days you have to live with your phone. He said, but I kind of like the idea of not having mobile phones, and so it's a bit retro, is Thierry.
Yeah. That's really good. Yeah, I saw that. Check it out. Check out the DTM Instagram page. There's some great stuff on there. Always worth checking out. They pick up on some wonderful stuff, and also the quick fire questions with Thierry Vermeulen. On board with Frank Pereira, he has the dubious distinction of being the driver to have picked up the 25th track limit infringement of this session. Yes, track limits are well and truly back, and he's out on track. So that was turn 1 on the previous lap. Back out on track again now, trying to improve on that. He's in P2 at the moment at 131.137.
I won't name the driver in question, but we had a wet Silverstone last weekend, British Touring Car Championship weekend, and in one of the support categories, one driver in a 30-minute qualifying session had, to begin with, 14 laps taken away from him for track limits. In the end, he got one back, so it was only 13. He also got 2 black flags during the session for excessive track limits. So this is nothing, really. This is absolutely fine. Only 25 between all of them.
I'll find out who it is from you off air, and I'm going to publish it. That's a name and shame, that's what I say.
No, we won't do that.
No. Of course not.
It was the wet weather. Luca Engstler, changing the subject rapidly, just moved up to 8th place with a 131.574. We've got 0.8 of a second between the top 13. In the dry around here, every little fraction of a second is going to be huge, because last year the top 20 were covered by 0.6 of a second in Sunday qualifying. So that is half a tenth of a second per corner, the difference, nothing between them. So that's going to be key.
It's insane, isn't it? You think to yourself, surely you could just break a fraction of a second later. Surely you could find that somewhere, but clearly not. It is really down to absolute thousandths of a second. It's phenomenal, and these drivers all on the absolute edge. As Kelvin van der Linde on the edge in Sector 2, absolute best. Not so in Sector 1, but they're going very wide on the exit of Turn 10 to complete Sector 3. So he'll come across the line, and he goes fastest. So 130, the first driver into the 30s, at 130.968.
Yeah, let's get right on the edge of the circuit, wasn't he there? So you can't have all 4 wheels beyond the curbs. He was pretty close to it. The team manager of car number 25, which is Ben Durr, the McLaren, requested to race control immediately, which was a message that came up on the race control screen here in the commentary box about a minute or so ago. That won't be to have a polite chat. That'll be something that's some infringement that's happened, maybe on track, but also maybe off track in the pit lane, that they want to talk to the Durr Motorsport team about. As we look at Lucas Stoltz, who wasn't that long ago at the start of the session, he was the one who got up to pace very quickly on a drying track. He was quickest, but he's now, as they've all improved, he's down to 11th place suddenly.
Yeah, it changes very quickly as the track evolves and as more rubber gets laid down. Of course, there'll probably be plenty of rain overnight, and we'll wash all that lovely rubber off, and I'll have to do it all again tomorrow morning. But at the moment, the track is getting quicker and quicker as this session goes on. So Kelvin van der Linde's recently set 130.968 may well be under threat. It might be under threat by himself, because he's done a personal best in Sector 1, an absolute best in Sector 2. He's into Sector 3 at the moment, so he's at the top at 130.968. Luca Engstler also into the 30s. He's up to P2 with a 0.997. But is Kelvin van der Linde going to improve? I reckon he is. So 130.612 now for Lucas Stoltz up to the top. But Kelvin van der Linde crosses the line at 130.753. So Lucas Stoltz, listen to what you were saying, and he's back up to the top.
Yeah, good lap that from both of them. Good laps from Luca and from Kelvin. Kelvin a little bit downbeat about the chances. Said the Audi is a car that has traditionally struggled around here in dry conditions. Last year on the Sunday, Martin Tomczyk, the team principal, who's been a race winner here himself in DTM at the Red Bull Ring, said, look, the car, there was nowhere. We're going to potentially struggle in the dry. It's about trying to get through it. And Calvin, we had a media roundtable with him for a good 25 minutes, half an hour. He was talking to us, to the media. A really good form, actually. And one of the things he said in relation to this weekend was that, you know, probably, realistically, if it's dry, we're looking at finishing somewhere between 5th and 10th. I think that's where we're at. So the ideal for me is that my championship rivals don't have a great weekend. He said, if I can't win, I'll be very happy if there's a BMW 1, 2, 3 finish, take some points away from my rivals as well. Thierry Vermeulen went briefly to the top of the times, but not for long, because Maro Engel has got even quicker. So 130.3 for Maro, or 130.6 for Thierry. Mercedes and Ferrari first and second. Lucas Stoltz down to third. Kelvin van der Linde fourth. And then Meini and Auer in the Mercedes up there, 5th and 6th at the moment as well. And Calvin reckoned with the BOP, Mercedes would be a factor this weekend, even though traditionally they've got lots of podiums around here, but they haven't traditionally been fighting for the wins. And we haven't had a Mercedes win here since Marcel Fessler back in 2003, 21 years ago.
God, that's a great bit of information. Good bit of digging there, that is. Well, Mercedes certainly want to do something about that, because we're back to 1, 2, 3 at the top. Lucas Stoltz at 130.067 ahead of Archer Meini and Maro Engel, but quickest in Sector 1, Lucas Auer, also in a Mercedes. He jumps up to P3. So now 1, 2, 3, 4, all 4 Mercedes occupying the top 4 spaces.
And just in case you weren't watching free practice one with us this morning, where were you? Why weren't you watching? But if you weren't watching, just to quickly go over the BOP that changes, the Audis and the Mercedes have slightly bigger air restrictors than they had here last year and had at the Saxon Ring. So they're the same weight. The Audi in total is 1,305 kilograms. The Mercedes are 1,330 kilograms. But the Audi has got two 37mm restrictors. They had a 36mm restrictor here in 2023. So in theory, a bit more power, a bit more air can get through to the engine. And the Mercedes last year had 34.5mm restrictors here at the Red Bull Ring, but they got 36mm, 1.5mm up. That might explain the performance that we've seen so far.
We need to work on turn 1. There was track limit again in previous lap.
Yeah, I'd say a third of the track limits have been at turn 1, a third at turn 9 and a third at turn 10. They're the key areas, aren't they? So,
well, I'd like to tell you how many track limits there have been.
Yeah, well, how many fingers have you?
Well, our screen isn't big enough. I mean, it's certainly well in excess of 30. I think we're hitting towards 40. But they've gone off the screen now because we haven't got a widescreen TV. But a lot of track limit infringements, and this is the ongoing story. It might be that the drivers are going to be gathered up and have the rulebook thrown at them overnight, because the stewards don't like this very much. The latest is Nicky Tim, who's been quite quiet so far today. He's in P11 at 130.612, but he's the latest. But now he's beaten there with Clemens Schmid, who's had many track limit infringements warnings during this session.
Yeah, that lap is taken away from you. That will continue to happen in qualifying. Then if you've had 2 warnings that you ignore in the race, then you start getting penalties for track limits as well. I suppose it's a case of see what you can get away with in free practice and see just how far you can push the envelope, because the closer to the track limits you can get, the quicker you're going to be through, especially turns 9 and 10. It's just not going beyond it. Bortolotti, absolute best in the middle sector. That was wrestling the car, though, very wide and over the curbs for Mirko. Still kept his foot buried, of course, though, because he's brave, and he did a 129.806.
Despite that.
Yeah, quickest lap of the session so far, quickest lap of the day so far, of course, as well. Only 61 thousandths quicker than Maro Engel, then. So this will be a slight worry for Kelvin van der Linde. As it's got drier, he's gone down the order, and his 2 closest rivals are now the fastest 2 in the session.
Yes, and what a wrestling match that was coming out of turn 10. The World Drifting Championship's going there for Mirko Bortolotti, but he still went to the top there. Kelvin van der Linde, as you say, down to 9th place at the moment. Purple in Sector 1 for Lucas Auer last time around, so still the Mercedes. They are 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, but Mirko Bortolotti wanting to ruin the Mercedes party. Going to the top, we are into pretty well the last minute of free practice. So the last minute before we start thinking about the setup for qualifying.
Lucas Auer backed off quite a bit, or had a moment through the last sector, so he lost 3/4 of a second in the end, but he's right, he was flying in the middle of that lap, but it didn't quite come together. Personal best for Mirko Bortolotti through the first sector of this lap. 40.0 is only a 10th down on the best second sector time. So although it's not a personal best or an absolute best middle sector, this is still going to be a good lap. Should be a slightly less wild ride through the end of the lap as well. We're right on board with Mirko Bortolotti. That's nice and smooth. Is it going to be quick again? I think it will. 1:29.806 is his best lap. There's a 1:29.885 on that lap. So that in itself would have been good enough for the 4th quickest time, but very decent effort again. But Lukas Stolz goes into the 1:29.7s with his best lap, the best lap of the session, 1:29.764. The other Luca from Mercedes, Luca Auer, with the absolute best middle sector. Here he comes, very wide, coming out through turn 10. The checkered flag is out. Is he going to end the day with the quickest time in both sessions? No, is the answer. 4th quickest. Lucas Stolz, quickest in free practice 2. Lucas Auer, who you look at now, was quickest in the wet in free practice 1, but that was a good effort. And he ends up 4th quickest overall. Not yet done though, Brian, because Front Pereira is on a charge.
Front Pereira has seen one of the Lamborghinis could go to the top. He thinks if you can do it, I can do that as well. Personal best in Sector 1, personal best in Sector 2, just the final part of the last sector into turn 9. Nice bit of curb out wide, not crossing the right line, then out onto the pit straight. So Front Pereira crossing the line now, and it is going to be a 1:20. We wait for the clock to stop. Oh, a bit early there. 1:30. Oh, I said 8 to 1:30.211. So lost a bit of time in the final sector there.
Maro Engel did a personal best right at the end of the session, 1:29.854, and there were a few personal bests a bit further back as well. Nicky Tim, Thomas Preining, Jack Aitken in 10th, 11th and 12th positions. Lucas Stolz comes through, so another really good lap, 1:29.773. That is only 9 thousandths slower than his own best lap of the session. So he's got the fastest 2 laps of the day now, and a 1:29.764 followed by a 1:29.773. How's that for consistency? Arjun Maini crosses the line to end his session. It's been a pretty good day for Arjun. 7th overall in that session, have been up in the top 5 in the wet this morning. So, as we expected, it got quicker and quicker and quicker as the track dried up and the drivers went for it a bit more. We started the times in the 1:36s, some of them even on wet tyres to begin with. But by the end of the session, a 1:29.7. We should get quicker than that if it's dry, if the conditions are right for qualifying tomorrow morning. And look at that for a backdrop, the mountains in the background, the low cloud. It is spectacular here at Spielberg. If you've never been, save up and get yourself some flights here to DTM next year. It's a brilliant, brilliant venue. So Lucas Stolz, quickest, 1:29.764, only 42 thousandths clear of Mirko Bortolotti, the driver 2nd in the championship, and Maro Engel only 90 thousandths of a second behind, 3rd in the championship, 3rd quickest. Lucas Auer, a good day, 4th after being quickest in free practice 1. René Rast was 5th, Anjan Nguyen in 6th place. Arjun Maini has had a good day as well, 7th. Front Pereira in 8th. Max Powell 9th, and Nicky Tim, who was fairly quiet at the start of the session, broke up into the top 10 as well, with just over half a second between those top 10 runners. 11th place then for Thomas Preining, a winner here 2 years ago. The reigning champion was just ahead of Jack Aitken, who was 12th. Kelvin van der Linde slipping back to 13th to give him and the team something to worry about potentially overnight. 7/10 of a second away from the fastest time of the session, only just ahead of his teammate Ricardo Feller, 32 thousandths of a second between them. And it was Luca Engstler 15th. Thierry Vermeulen, wasn't long ago, he was top of the times. He ended up in 16th place. think he had a lap taken away as well, which was the lap that put him right at the top of the times. Clement Schmidt 17th, Sheldon van der Linde and Marco Wittmann only 18th and 19th, with just the McLaren of Ben Durr behind them at the end of 45 minutes of free practice 2 on a drying circuit. So that's their last chance to get their heads around the setup. Now they'll be poring over the data for the next hour or so in the team trucks. Qualifying is set to get underway tomorrow morning at 9:20 a.m. local time. We'll be on air 5 minutes before that at 9:15 with some build-up, and then the race, of course, as is usually the case, will be underway at 1:30 tomorrow afternoon. So Maro Engel, super slow-mo of the driver, who ends the day with the 3rd fastest time, 2nd quickest for Mirko Bortolotti. A couple of wild moments today, but as ever, the Italian is rapid. Can he close the 9-point gap tomorrow to championship leader Kelvin van der Linde? But Lucas Stoltz on a roll at the moment. The winner at the Saxon Ring ends the next event as the quickest driver on Friday. But Friday and Saturday are two very different things. Qualifying is going to be all important. That is coming up tomorrow. And a reminder of how it stands in the championship. 170 points for Kelvin van der Linde, 7 clear of Mirko Bortolotti. And then Maro Engel only 15 adrift on 155 points. Jack Aitken has had more wins than all of them, in 4th place in the championship. So that's it from Brian Oliver and me, Chris.